Okay. Okay, good day, everybody, and welcome to Africam Live. My name's Phil Stephanie, and I'm going to take you through these live cameras for the next 30 minutes. And let's see what comes our way. We're going to move from one camera to the next, wherever there's any animal activity or bird activity. We'll also spend time just having a look around as though we're sitting in the hide. One of my favorite things to do while in the bush, mixing it up with game drives and walking. It's just a wonderful experience sitting back and seeing what comes our way. It's also, I think, one of the rawest ways to experience anticipation. You just never know. So we've started here at Olifantskamp on the beautiful Olifants River, which is in almost full flow. I wouldn't say flooding yet, but those of you that have been watching the cams over the last couple of days, you would have even seen and heard the rain. The clouds are still black and thick. So there's been quite a big frontal system that's moved through the whole northern part of South Africa with big rains. I would say, I think a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we would have had beautiful sand banks scattered throughout the river, but now it's wall to wall, or bank to bank, should I say, water. Lovely flow for the area, and so important to get as much rain as possible. I know lodges and things that are on the river's edges get a little nervous when the rains start falling, but for the wild system out there, the amount of rain that falls between now and March will really determine how animals and how the bush gets through the winter months, which will start in May again. So really a wonderful time of year. It won't be long now before we start looking out for babies. A lot of animals have their peak birth during the months of December and January. So we'll look out for the first births of the year. We're just having a good look at the river banks here. Can't see much. It's a beautiful landscape though. Is that a hippo on the far left-hand side? I'm not sure if that's a piece of debris. Let's see if it pops down. Oh no, I think it is a hippo. You just see its little ears. It's moving its nostrils up. That was a good spot. Well done, Zumi. I'm sure the hippos, might even open its mouth. It's just like having a good pair of binoculars. These cameras are quite incredible to zoom out and pick things out, and then the zoomies zoom right in on them. Oh, and there it's gone. So sometimes the question gets asked, how long do hippos spend underwater? And it's quite an interesting one because they don't actually spend that long. You know, a crocodile in comparison can spend up to 2 hours, maybe more in some cases, underwater. But hippos, maybe 5 minutes, depending on the reason why they've ducked down. Sometimes if you came along with a boat or maybe a canoe, they might stay down for longer, but not much more than 5 minutes, and they'll come up for a breath of air. The other interesting thing I always find almost funny, I think, is that they don't swim. For an animal that spends 90% of its day in the water, if you had to put it in deep water that it couldn't touch the bottom, it would drown. It actually walks on the riverbed floor to get across. And they can walk and then quite quickly, and then they'll push off from the bottom almost like a whale, blow out through their nose, get a big breath of air, and carry on. And it's nice to see here, but that's why you'll often find them close to the banks when the rivers are flooded like this. We've often seen waterbuck feeding on that island. You can see the water's actually been quite a lot higher in the last couple of days as well. There's a lot of flattened foliage. There's the beautiful green of those fig trees. You can hear some white-fronted bee-eaters flying around. Well, that looks like an impala or something under the fig tree. Maybe we'll zoom in. It's tricky to see from this distance, but that antelope, it also doesn't look like it's eating much. But what will often happen is when the wind blows, it'll blow some of the leaves off the tree, as well as some of the ripe fruit. And so I'm not sure what animal that is. Let's see if we can zoom in. Could also be a bushbuck that will be feeding. Oh, there we go. Yes. Yeah, it looks like a bushbuck. It makes more sense, feeding on the leaves that have fallen down of the sycamore fig tree. So again, it's quite interesting, the relationship that the wind has with some of these browsers. Really important part of the system, knocking down some leaves, because otherwise that bushbuck would never be able to get up there. And it's the same principle when you see elephants feeding on trees. You often see bushbuck or nyala, sometimes kudu, close by to the elephants as they shake the trees or possibly even break the branches down to the ground, enabling the smaller animals to get hold of the juicy, nutritious leaves. That was quite a nice surprise there under the tree, a bushbuck. Let's just see before we move to any other cameras what else is hiding in the shadows. This time of year, as the bush gets thicker, it does always make it harder to try and spot things. But in that way, it's quite fun. The lovely call of a dark-capped bulbul. There it goes again. Wonderful, peaceful thing to do is just to sit back and listen to the sounds of nature. Quite a steady flow to the river. And as the season wears on, those trees in the background will mostly all get their leaves. So it's going to be a period of transformation in the next couple of weeks. Folks, I think we're going to cross over to Tembe, a different part of the country. we're going to be shifting all the way across to the north and east, very close to the Mozambique border, where there's an elephant having a wonderful drink at the water outlet as usual. I'm sure he's already sprayed himself with a bit of mud, but he's in no rush this afternoon to just take it easy. It'll be pretty warm there right now. It's quite a tropical environment. It's probably somewhere in the 30s, maybe 35 degrees Celsius. For this big animal, he's quite happy just to enjoy his time at the water. Now, we spoke briefly on the last show about where the other waters or the next waterhole. And in this area, these natural pan systems that occur can stretch for quite long. And you can go through pockets of woodland or forest, and then it opens out again. This one, of course, gets water all year round. But now that the rains have come, a lot of the waterholes in the area will be full. But it looks like in the next couple of days, the clouds clear out and things are going to warm up quite nicely. The usual summer system, if it's a good rainy season, which, like I say, we all hope for. Typically what happens is you get really hot days, 2 or 3 of them, and then on the 4th or 5th day, you might find that the clouds start to build. And sometimes, if it's well into the cycle, by the afternoon, a big thunder shower happens for 2, maybe 3 hours, but typically 2 hours of a big downpour. That clears out, and then you have another hot morning, 2 or 3 days of heat, and then another cycle of rain. That would be a normal cycle, a good cycle of rain. And the fact that it's already started, as always, one lives in hope that it carries on that way. There's some woolly-necked storks patrolling the open areas in the background there. And elephants had a decision to move away quite quickly. They often do get referred to as phantoms of the bush. And just like that, he's disappeared. Oh, I can see some of the lesser masked weavers coming down to the water there. They've also been the ones very busy making their nests. There's a grey heron as well. And in the far corner on the right, there's an Egyptian goose. That's one thing about birding. There's always something to look at. Those weavers look like they're having a bath rather than having a drink. Maybe cooling off a little from all the building and weaving of the nests. But maybe we can get the camera to go across to their nest, across the waterhole, and just see how far they've gotten. I would say by now there must be some breeding pairs that are using the finished product, which for the weavers needs to be almost 100%. You see the constant movement of the weavers in the background. They're going up into that acacia tree. There you see them busy. Actually lovely to hear them as well. So that constant high-pitched chattering, that's the call of the weavers, the males trying to display and trying to attract females, and also excitedly trying to weave the nests. You can see there's some nests that are brownish in color and others that are green. The ones that are green are the new ones. They're busy either in construction or maybe just trying to show off to start with to the females. But the brown ones will typically be the ones that are already approved of by the female. And you might find that there's a breeding pair inside there. But it is also quite interesting to remember that while they're making the new ones, like some of those green ones, the males also make a whole nest and then tear it down themselves, essentially practicing. They're a bit of perfectionists. I don't know if anyone's ever had the chance to have a close look at a well-woven nest. They are truly incredible. They're almost 100% waterproof. They get lined on the inside with all sorts of things from their own feathers or maybe some Spanish moss, the seed fluff of some trees, but they really make them incredibly homely as well as safe. So they make them on the very ends of the trees. It's harder for, in particular, snakes to get in there, and the hole's always at the bottom. Snakes can get in there, but it's definitely much harder and sometimes not worth it. They might rather go and find a dove's nest to raid, which is often just a platform of twigs. And as you can see, it's certainly not short of numbers, so the survival rate of the weavers is pretty high. It's just a wonderful picture in itself. The dark sky, the red flowers of the weeping boerbean, and the bright green grass. The green's really popping out in the front there. And the sandy patches. The perfect picture. Talking about pictures, I think let's go across to some of the photographs that have been taken over the course of the weekend. The first photograph is quite an interesting one just to chat about. Of a leopard. This photograph is a really great shot that illustrates the white underneath the tail of this leopard. And really what that has to do with is visual communication. So he's also got black behind the ears, and that's also for visual communication. In particular, because leopards are solitary animals, sometimes you'll find that it's really important when cubs are following the mother through the long grass, for example, and that tail starts to twitch, or if it drops down to the bottom, those cubs will be really aware of the white on the tail. I don't know if anyone has house cats at home, but if you watch the end of the tail, if the cat sees something of interest, it starts to twitch, then the body starts to drop, and they're really aware of body language. So that's the reason why a leopard has that white on the back end of its tail, as well as the black behind the ears. So we had another photograph up just to compare the two. But here's that photograph again of a lioness that has black behind the ears as well. And in their case, of course, if she's got cubs, it's really important. But when it comes to hunting and you have a pride with you, you often find that pride members will look around for that black behind the ears, and actually lions have a black tuft of hair on the end of their tail, serving the same purpose as the leopard. But when other pride members have a look through the long grass, that black really sticks out from behind, and they can then plan their position in regards to a team effort to have a successful hunt. If the ears start flattening down, they start to look for potential threat. But the visual communication and body language with all animals, but predators in particular, is vital. And such a clever natural design or development, everything has its place. And talking about natural beauty, this photograph was taken by Ingwe Queen. We've seen many wonderful sunrises and sunsets, but I thought this was really quite a special shot. Such a nice thing to do. Often in the morning, I make a cup of coffee and just put the early morning sounds on Africam. The cameras are often looking at the sunrise, and just a great shot. Beautiful colors, perfect silhouette. So keep taking the shots, everybody. Anyone who likes to snapshot away, keep them coming. I love looking through them and choosing some that have some form of impact on me. There's another photograph I'd like to share with you, and this time it's of a great raptor, actually one of the prettier raptors. It's a African harrier hawk. Some might know it as a gymnogene. And I wanted to discuss the behavior of this bird rather than its looks. But what it's doing there in that what looks like a lead wood is it's checking on all of those holes. You see there's a big crack on the top right, on the right-hand limb of that tree. Just below the bird, there's another hole. And in the main trunk, there's another hole. They have quite a special design in order to hunt. They're quite specialized. They can hang with one leg upside down, for example, and put their other leg into a hole, sometimes right up inside, and almost bend their elbow all the way around in order to feel for, in particular, bats. So of course there's lots of things that'll nest inside those holes, and if there's chicks or squirrels, it'll have to grab down. But they specialize in feeding on bats, which hang from the top down, and they have to find a way to get in there. And they have these double jointed elbows, if you like. Quite a specialized raptor, the African harrier hawk. Let's go back to Tembe and see what's happening. There, wow, nice big elephant bull has arrived. It's quite interesting to note that the level of or time that elephants are spending at the waterhole at the moment and the numbers does seem to be less, but they keep coming back. And I would say it's predominantly got to do with that fresh water they constantly seek. One wouldn't think they'd be picky, but I guess if you have the choice, why not? This bull's right-hand tusk seems to be thicker than the one on the left. It's quite an unusual growth, that. Otherwise, they're about the same length. I'd say this elephant's somewhere in its mid-30s. It's always quite tricky to tell because these elephants in Tembe have huge tusks, even the young ones. But if you look at the size of him, he's in great condition as well. I'd say he's just coming into his prime and nice and clean after the rains. Let's just listen for a moment, listen to him drinking. Really is a wonderful pace that gets set watching these cameras. If one does have a gap in the day, just to turn these cameras on and sit back and enjoy the slow pace of nature, even though we're spread all around the world, it really is a privilege. You hear the birds, watch the breeze. Sounds like a Diedrich's cuckoo in the background. It's a lovely summer bird. Let's go across to Tau. Let's see if there's any greenery there yet. It has also been rain there, but I think it'll take a bit longer for the green tinge to show through. Some red-billed teals having a feed. There's Egyptian goose in the background there pretending to be a pile of elephant dung. It's pretty good camouflage. No, it still looks pretty dry. Although they have had rain, and like I say, it's a different environment. This is more central in South Africa. It's still quite far north, but it's a much rockier environment. And so the big open grasslands, there's some behind the hills there, which is where I suspect the wildebeest and zebras are absolutely loving the new grasses that are coming through after the rains. I would say that come December, maybe January, but by December, I think those hills will have some green leaves, or sorry, the trees on the hills will have some green leaves on them. And let's keep panning across here and just see if there's anything across the waterway here. There's a spurring goose. It's going to be interesting to watch as the clouds move away during the course of the week and things will get much hotter again. And of course, the fact that there has been some rain, it will also get humid, which will add to the temperature climb. I would say that the activity around the waterholes on a more regular basis will increase again until the rains come, and that'll be the new cycle. I'd like to go across to Nkoropan just as a contrast in color. Look at that. Yeah, you can clearly see the wonderful effects, positive effects of the rain. The grass has grown out wonderfully. The wildebeests and zebra and other grazers are going to be really enjoying that. I keep looking out for big herds of buffalo that sometimes frequent this waterhole. I'm sure they'll come through at some point. Let's have a pan around. At the moment, it really does look like everyone's scattered out to find all the juicy bits of new food. I just wanted to have a look at the contrast of the two areas. I'd like to go back to Tau. There was a question by or from Dizzy, what lives in the hills? Yeah, it's a great question, actually. There's a really interesting animal that spends a lot of its time in the hills there, and it's quite unusual. There are other things. Baboons will roost up and move around in those hills, quite a safe place to be. As the flowers come along, kudus won't mind walking through there to feed on the leaves. But when I think of the koppies, as we call them, of Madikwe, I think of brown hyena denning sites. I don't know if you've seen a brown hyena come down, or maybe you've seen them in person. But what they up in those rocky outcrops are perfect places for hyenas, especially the brown hyena, to find a hideaway, not only to have pups, but also as clans. They'll live up in there. And some of those rocks are quite big, those boulders, and they form cracks and holes and caves. And I often scan those hillsides with binoculars when I'm in that area on safari and looking for hyenas. But leopards will also use that space up there. Again, perfect, quiet, safe place to have cubs. Lions will do the same. And sometimes you'll find that there's walkways, so animals create paths from one feeding zone to the next. So you could also find things like elephants moving through the hills, but they wouldn't necessarily spend too much time out there. You'd also find rock hyrax. Some people may know them as rock rabbits, and they also attract things like black eagles that specialize in hunting them. So there's a lot going on the hills and the koppies of Madikwe around Tau Camp. It's a great question. Thanks a lot, Dizzy. I hope you get to see a brown hyena. You must keep looking in the cams in the evening. They're almost predominantly nocturnal. So keep a lookout. Folks, just before we come to the end of the show, I want to go back to Tembe. And it really is a classic example of you just never know what's going to come out of the woodworks, as they say. There's a whole family of elephants come down. I think that's the elephant bull that we were watching on his own. And now he's been joined by these potentially irritating youngsters. Disturb his peace. But it does seem to be quite playful. He's not too irritated yet. He's probably enjoying the company, as they are very social. That little one tripped there. Easy boy. He's actually being quite accommodating, letting them all in. Oh, wow, look at the little one. It might come down to the water on the left there. There was a very little elephant. There it is. Look at that. say somewhere between 6 and 10 months of age. It's tricky to tell. If one could look closer, you could maybe see a little bit of hair on it. Looks sometimes when they're really young, they're still covered in black hair. But I'd say, yeah, 7 or 8 months old, trying to, I don't know, worm its way in there. Might have a tough time. It might have to wait. That's always nice to see these different ages. And typically when you see elephants in big groups and then you have different sizes and different ages, that will be an immediate family unit, as opposed to some days you see elephants of a similar size around the water holes, and those will typically be the bulls. Oh, he's decided they should push off. He wants more. Oh, all the females are not so keen to let him bully his way around. But he seems to have got his way. Those are quite big females on the right there, almost calming him down, trying to let him know that there's lots to go around, but he's a little feisty. Then again, there's no need to fight. Folks, I think we'll leave the show at that. Keep watching these elephants enjoying themselves. It's quite likely they'll cover themselves in mud before they move off to make use of all the fresh food. Thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow afternoon and see what we see. Have a great day.